Hello and welcome to a fantastic new episode of RGDS, your retro gaming discussion show. Now today we have a really special episode for you as we have Martyn Brown on the call. Yes, the man who co-founded the public domain house 17-bit software and co-founder of Team 17, so behind such all-time classics like Alien Breed, Super Frog, Body Blows, Project X and of course Worms, to name but a few. So thank you and welcome Martyn for coming on to the show. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant that you've come on. I mean, you've been so instrumental in the gaming industry, and certainly my and many of our listeners' gaming past as well.
Yeah, too kind.
So I guess let's go right the way back to the beginning of things. I know you probably get a bit tired of sort of these sort of like standard questions, but I think it's important to see the beginnings of things. So how did you get into computer and video games? What are your early days? What drew you to the industry?
Well, I think it really when I was young, I just got obsessed really with very early Atari stuff in mid to late 70s.
Yeah.
And I guess it kicked off when my dad bought me a VCS, and I got even more absorbed when that arrived. I never really stopped, so I've followed it ever since, and I've always been massively interested in technology, and I never ever assumed I'd be involved in it in any way.
And on those Atari VCS days, was there any particular favourites you remember and perhaps inspired you later on?
I don't know. I played a lot. I used to play a lot of Maze Craze for some reason, and I liked adventure games.
Yeah.
I thought it was very simple back then, but I obviously played a lot of Space Invaders and Asteroids. I don't think there was any. I liked the games that came out of third parties, so I can't remember the names now, but there were a couple of companies that made games that looked a lot more technically astute than Atari were doing. So I used to go along to shop in Leeds and see the latest games that they were bringing out, which was it was a great time.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, no, I love the Atari thing. I'm dead excited for the new Atari 50th anniversary coming out as well. That's going to be great. So I was sort of reading up and listening to a couple of interviews that you've done in the past. Am I right in thinking that you once worked for a game shop in your early days?
Yeah. When I left college, I went to work for Microbyte. It was a northern franchise. It was just a group of shops, as it was called back then. It just later became a franchise. I knew the owner, and I took a job just to see me through a couple of weeks, see me through Christmas, really.
Yeah.
And it became a lot more than that. I ended up managing the shop, and it was through there that I set 17-bit up.
Ah, that's fantastic. So as early as that. So is that around about 1985? Was it?
Yeah, 85, 86. So 17-bit set up about 88 when I'd been in the shop a while, and I was managing the Leeds shop, and then I got into the Amiga and into the demo scene, and it just sort of clicked really. It seemed an obvious thing to do.
Yeah, so that's quite early with the 85. I was quite surprised that you started 17-bit.
Yeah.
That far back. Well, what made you choose the name, actually, incidentally?
Well, it's just a play on words, like most of the things I used to do back then. It was just because everything was 16-bit, it was just that bit better. So
yeah,
it's obviously had to be 17-bit. So
yeah, that's good. I mean, particularly in 85, and that's very early for 16-bit, isn't it? So that's quite with a lot of foresight that you had there.
Well, I don't know about foresight. It was a lot of John Smiths and Tetlers and stuff. So
yeah. Yeah, you got any fond memories of that game shop in the?
Yeah. I'm still in touch with most of the staff from back then. They all remain friends to this day. So I catch up with them every year or two. So it's nice to see those guys.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, it must have been a lovely time and a great opportunity to play lots of games during that.
I mean, obviously we're in the shop. We used to do the ordering of the games, so we used to be the first to see most releases when they came out. So it was massively interesting that every couple of days at that time, certainly in 87-ish, 86, 87, games are coming out so often, new games are coming out and all the time. So he kept abreast of how things were changing and how what people looked for in games when they came into the store, and what really turned people onto new games. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, no, great, a great sort of lesson in your later involvement with
Yeah,
games
yeah,
and design, knowing what will work and that. So actually, just so I sort of understand with 17-bit in
yeah,
the early days. So because obviously I know it from the Amiga days when it was
yeah,
a big public domain house, and it was
yeah.
certainly my favourite public domain house. I used to have all your CDs as well. I
Oh,
had a
yeah.
A570, and that was just science fiction, being able to access all the library. But
Yeah.
I mean, in '85, I mean, Amiga wasn't mainstream or anything at that
No,
point. So,
I just started working with Microwrite in '86, I think, so 85,
mm,
'86. So Amiga in Europe came later, really, sort of '87, 88, really, and really launching 17-bit came after in 1990. So
oh, I see. Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, sticking with 1985, because of course you did a Spectrum game, I
yeah, yeah,
understand. Was that Henry's Horde, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, I played that, and I think it's a great game. It was done to our listeners. It was like an alternate, published by Alternative
Yeah,
Software.
yeah, that alternative was me. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, you actually, sorry, when you mean Alternative Software, was that your?
I was alternative
Oh, you were
software. Yeah, yeah,
Alternative
yeah,
Software.
yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
no, I didn't realise that.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, that's really cool. So self-published then, and it was a Jet Set Willy clone. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
was it using the actual Jet Set Willy engine, or was it? Did you code it ground up, or?
I think it might have been it. I mean, I did a little bit of the code. I just did the sound code and all the design and stuff. My mate looked after all the code, but it was in later years that I found out it was using an engine that was derived from the original, I think.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic game and a great designer. I particularly love sort of about halfway through the game when you even have like Manic Miner level and a Chucky Egg level
Yeah, yeah.
where they come to character. I guess different days with
Oh, yeah, yeah,
where
yeah.
copyright was less of a concern.
Well, I think I was only 17 at the time, so
Yeah.
I was very naive and didn't know the ways of the world. So it's very, very different today.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. But yeah, no, I mean, it must have been a great experience, sort of like designing. I mean, was that your first game that you designed, or was it? Have you done
Um,
others that had not been
I'd done
published?
other ones, but I mean this was the first full design, if you like. It was just doing what I loved, So there was no rhyme or reason to it. There's no great overarching plan. Just something we did, and it's a friend at college, and we just got on with it, really. So a chance to make a game at the time was fantastic.
No, that's awesome. So from '85 onwards, because I know you made a game in 1989 called Make a Break on the Atari
Yeah,
ST. But
yeah.
during that period of '85 to '89, was it you're working in the game shop
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
you were building up the, was it always PD library, the 17-bit? Or
Yeah, so
yeah.
I'd become really a big follower of the demo scene. Well, I worked at Microwrite and got the Amiga in the early days, and I just got really interested in did a big collection. I got an Amiga at an early point. I just started collecting it myself, and it just got to a point where we decided to do like 18-bit as like a club, really, that you could get into the retail software. You could get public domain offerings or demo offerings and things. So we just sort of built it up from there, really.
No, that's awesome. As I say, I mean, I remember when it was, well, by the time I got my Amiga, probably '91, I think it was. You were the kings of public domain at that point, and of course the beginning of publishing as well.
Yeah.
So you obviously made Make a Break, which was a quiz game, sort
Yeah,
of based on sort of snooker quiz game of Give Me a Break, I guess, a great inspiration, isn't it, that TV show? I think
Yeah,
it's
it was just
Yeah.
something I was doing while I was doing the PD stuff. So
Yeah.
just the owner of Microwrite, Mick Roberts, who's sadly not with us anymore. He was a big fan of the game, and so I worked on it really as who had also done Henry's Horde as well. It became a long relationship. He went on to found Team 17 with me, so we had a very long working relationship. So yeah, I did Make a Break as just a spare time hobby type of game, really. So.
I've got you. Yeah, no, and then that was for the Atari ST, wasn't it?
No, it was Amiga. So,
Oh, it was on Amiga.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
never played it on the Amiga. I was
Yeah.
just relying on internet to tell me things.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. So yeah, okay. So now we're coming up to the point. Obviously, you're doing fantastically well with this bit that's getting bigger and bigger. You first, you say you've come to the Amiga early on. It's obviously, really fell in love with the machine. You can sort of like tell with that. I mean, what was it about the Amiga that really jumped out at you?
Well, it had everything from fantastic sound to great graphics, and it was a great machine because, as I saw it, ordinary people could do great things with it. So a small group of 2 or 3 guys could do, world-beating stuff, really. So I mean, that's what really excited me and excited other groups, really. So, all those early 1993 games, most of them were developed by 3 or 4 people, really, and it was a level playing field, so that it wasn't like maybe like today, where there's a massive department for FMV, there's massive script, all sorts of stuff. You're talking hundreds of people working modern day games where just a small team worked on in those days, and the feeling was great.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I mean, it was amazing, the game. So, because obviously that group of, particularly a trio of individuals that made a lot of the games, although obviously other developers. So originally they were called, am I right, Team 7 International?
Well, right? I don't know about international.
Just Team 7.
Yeah, they called some Team 17, Team 7, sorry. Team 7. They were basically a collection of 3 guys in Sweden. I knew Rico, the artist.
Yeah.
It was over in England, then I went to Sweden. I introduced him to the Andreas and Peter Tilby, and they started working on a game. Rico moved to Sweden and still lives in Sweden now. So it was just knowing those guys, really, that's how the Team 17 came, because of it was a team, and they were Team 7, and we was 17-bit that introduced everybody. So it was all sort of a close-knit fit, and it just worked, so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you just sort of agreed to sort of like merge together.
Yeah. It's, I mean, it wasn't a highbrow plan. It was just about, let's make games. Let's what we're going to call ourselves. That was called, this is what it's going to call. There's no great plan for Team 17 other than make game number 1, which happened to be Alien Breed, and it was such a success that obviously people like it. Let's make more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm trying to get, because I know Team 7 worked on like a Amiga port of Miami Chase, and it was that when Alistair Brimble, because I know he did the music on that. Was that when he started getting introduced to the team, or?
Yeah, known Alistair a long time through 17-bit. So again, I introduced Alistair to work with the team. So it was a case of everything we do that Alistair will do the music and sound for. So he fit right in with the team. Everything was good. I mean, Miami Chase was a game that the guys started doing at first, but I don't think we were really set up to do publishing at that point, or really geared up for it. So we sort of passed on that, and then Codemasters released it.
Codemasters picked it up. Yeah. Yeah. And how did, because I mean, my first personal memories with sort of Team 17, when it sort of came to my sphere, was Full Contact. But you're saying Alien Breed came out first, or?
No. Well, yeah. When I started getting all the 17-bits, Team 17, I'm getting confused, 30 years ago, when I started getting Team 17, the guys had already probably about 3/4 of the way through Full Contact. So it was a case of releasing that, although we were working on Alien Breed full time. I will say 90% of the time was on Alien Breed, because that was next. that was also part of the grand plan, was to release only 1 meg only games, so, and it would do lavish sound effects and really make a statement for the games. Whereas Full Contact was half a meg, a basic Amiga, and it was finished. It was sort of too late to really adjust all that to make it all singing and dancing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, to our listeners, if you've not seen Full Contact, it was a beautiful IR Kung Fu style game, so martial arts fighter. It had gorgeous graphics, and one of the things that really stood out was that intro scene at the beginning, wasn't it, with the rotoscoping. It looked awesome. You saw like a martial artist doing the moves. Had great music again by Alistair Brimble, and it got reasonable reviews. I mean, I think there was a few. The balancing wasn't quite right in retrospect, but it was still. I mean, I used to love it. I mean, I was always a big fan of IR Kung Fu, and it really, even at that point, I know you had not too much involvement with this, and it was still half a meg, but it looks so much better than a lot of the games of the time. It looked really beautiful.
The whole point really was that there was the Amiga games, the retail games, the majority of which were ports from Atari ST, which as an Amiga owner I didn't like. So if a game was to use the full power of the Amiga and the full capabilities of the sound, music, and 32 color graphics and stuff, it would look much better, and it would, if everything went at 50 frames a second rather than 25 hertz on the T, it would undoubtedly look better. And it was a case of marrying all the technology with a solid game.
No, absolutely. I mean, but it's still very brave though to do the 1 megabyte. I know it wasn't at this point, but to have that ethos of, because of course not every Amiga had 1 megabyte back in.
You had to buy. I mean, I think we're largely responsible for a lot of sales of the hardware.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was a massive uptick of something like 30% or something as a direct result. But yeah, no, it's, as I say, very brave, but also quite brave to just concentrate on the Amiga. I mean, were you ever tempted as things progressed to look at other platforms?
Not really. At that point, we just so into Amiga that it was the only kind of platform that mattered. The Team 17, there wasn't an overarching direction of we're going to do all these games and all the formats. It was about making really good games, and we saw Amiga as a way to do that. We did have discussions. We were approached by a couple of companies about doing a Mega Drive port of the Alien Breed and things like that. It didn't work out, but I mean that was just a side issue, really. I mean, we just wanted to carry on making Amiga games. We were very comfortable doing it. We were very happy to do it. It just seemed the ideal way to carry on, really. So we just did that. We didn't foresee the problems that the Amiga would have in probably 93, 94. But we just thought Amiga would go on forever.
Yeah, no, I was of the same belief as well. I was gutted when I stuck with the Amiga till at least 95 and beyond. Yeah, so let's go on to the next game. So this is a game that, as you mentioned, you were sort of involved from the ground up, and of course a real favourite of mine. It's Alien Breed, which came out in 1991, and to our listeners, in case anybody's not played the game, it's kind of like it's obviously Aliens, the movie inspired, but sort of overhead shooter, a lot of influence of Gauntlet, but it was fantastic. I mean, it was the closest you had really to feel like you were in an Alien movie back in the day. So I'm just curious of the sort of process, because obviously this is the one that you became sort of involved with, and I know you had some involvement with the design. Is that correct, of this game?
Yeah.
So So, I mean, how did it sort of come about? Did you all sort of brainstorm, okay, what's our next game going to be, or?
Well, I mean, the design was led by Rico
Yeah.
Holmes, the artist, who started creating a really great look, and it was just sort of building upon what he'd built, and really, for me, I really wanted to get the atmosphere of the Alien films, and that sort of supplanted the idea of making the game 1 meg and making loads of great sound effects. A great, just a massive ambience to the game that just felt like it just felt way beyond what had been done before, really. So.
Yeah, no, I remember how impressive this was on its release. I mean, it was just, as you said, had all that wonderful speech of Lynette Reed, isn't it? That really good, great, clear sounds, and there were so many, when you were out seeing out of weapons and things. But it just played very much like something that would look at home in the arcades, even, which you're right, with all the Atari ST ports. Look.
Yeah, we're massively influenced by the arcades, so we wanted games to stand out and be revered like the games were.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so in those early days, I mean, was there any sort of changes to the design, anything that perhaps you wanted to include but got dropped because of constraints?
Well, I think in the first Alien Breed, I think there was a few things that we put in the sort of budget sequel, special edition, which we did for a few games, because generally speaking, it's a race to get the game finished. There's obviously commercial aspects and stuff happening all the time. You couldn't just, I think we'd have been so bloody trying to finish it now if there'd been no commercial pressures. So I think, if you give an X amount of time, you get a little bit of extra time, and then you have to sort of save it for another day. So, which we had an idea of doing about a year later of doing a re-release at budget, but we'd remix the game a little bit, so it played differently, and it would appeal to the people who bought the original.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I love that about 1317. And to my mind, you were the only ones ever doing it, wasn't it? Where you would, like the Alien Breed Special Edition 92, for example, you came out, it would be a year later, and as a budget, but it had like 12 extra missions. You'd added a password system, wasn't it, and things like that, and it added a better ending and things.
Well, it was all new levels.
Yeah, I mean, it was you restructured it all and made it a much better game. I mean, that is still my favourite of the series, to be honest. And that was lovely that you sort of did those remasters. Quite brave, I guess, to do it. Were you ever worried that people were gonna sort of hold off and once perhaps you've done a few of these remasters, people might hold off to the budget?
No, I don't think so. It never entered thoughts at all. I mean, to be honest, when we started on a new game, we didn't immediately think about, later we can do a remix and we do X, Y, Z to it. No, it only ever came to fruition when you've been thinking about a game for 7 or 8 months, and then you can't. It's only when you finish it up you think, we should have done this, we should have done that. Well, yeah, we can, but let's do it this way. So it was an unplanned, nice turn of events. It worked out quite well, really.
And of course, once you get to sort of like 1992, it's really going full steam here, isn't it? You released Project X came out, the fantastic horizontal shooter. Again, it was like arcade in the home, had the fantastic sound effects and things like that. I mean, and what were your memories of Project X?
We just went full gun on trying to make it, stand up to Nemesis and games like this at the time. Really, we wanted something that was absolutely bang on arcade, and it was a great opportunity to do it. So I mean, Rico was producing some amazing art, and it was just great to make it smooth, and just a smooth scroller. it seems to be really silly, just making it smooth, but it was. You have to think that there's been years of not so smooth scrolling games being released for Amiga, so at last to find a game that was that used full colour, that used every ounce of the Amiga to do that game. It got a lot of people right behind it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was brilliant. Of course, it was infamously hard, which thankfully for us mere mortals, you made it a bit easier in the budget version, the special edition. But talking to which, because this was the beginning of Amiga Power, famously started getting a little bit harsher, and it ended up with I don't know how much it manufactured on their part, but rivalry between Team 17 and Amiga Power. I mean, what's your side of the story of that and take of that?
It's all a bit of silliness, really. I guess naivety on both parts, really. It's just like we were trying to make a name for ourselves. Those guys were as well, so you can sort of look at things a little bit more balanced when you're looking back over 20, 30 years. We were extremely proud of everything we were doing, and we worked extremely long hours. And when he was sticking his neck out trying to do really great games, and then we were perceiving some sort of injustice done to the game, and sort of words get bandied about, so it sort of had to fuel to the fire. So yeah, it's one of those things. We weren't some big organisation like Nintendo or anything. We're just Team 17, a small company from Wakefield.
Yeah, no, I can understand. I mean, I always found it. I mean, although Amiga Power was the main one that I used to read back in the day, I always found it strange because I was playing your games and absolutely adoring them, so I couldn't understand why they were so down on them. Also, around about this time as well, you started bringing in other development teams, didn't you? So, for example, Psionic Systems did the game Assassin, which was like to our listeners is like a Strider clone side scrolling. It was quite a fun game for what it was. I mean, interesting, it's got the guy who did the graphics was Hayden Dalton, who went on to be a lead designer on Darksider games. And David Broadhurst, who the most thing I know him from is the fantastic Amiga ports like Bubble, Ghosts and Goblins and things. But how did that come about? I guess you were getting bigger, you were getting other teams just were they just ready-made games that they would offering to you?
In some cases they were. Obviously the notoriety of Team 17 is growing all the time, and we'd have small teams or just Hayden and Dave just set out just the first game, and they said we'd like to do a game with you, and I said I'd got an idea about wanting to do a game not unlike Stride, so that's how that came about with those guys who were based over in Oldham. So we got on with them really well, did 2 or 3 games with those with Dave and Hayden. It's because the time to do a game with Rico and Andreas and Alistair was about a year or so. So the commercial interests were that we could release more games and do more, as is always the case. But there's only so much you get out of one team in a set period. So one team became 2, became 3, and became 4 later on. So, and then later on we got a full studio going. So it was very much independent developers for the first 2 or 3 years, and then sort of 94, 95 we got a big building and a house studios in it.
Yeah. I mean, was it quite difficult as you were expanding and growing so quickly? I mean, it was quite rapidly. Did you find that difficult from your perspective?
Very much so, because I mean, I used to throw most of my thoughts and feelings into one game and hone it as much as possible. When you're going to do that 3 or 4 times over, and you got lots more discussions about other games and other thought, you get stretched, and you can't possibly work on that many games. I mean, I think in 1 year we're doing about 8 or 9 games were going on, and it's it's obvious. You can't hope to do the same level for each game, really. So
yeah, the quality. But I mean, you did an impressive job. I mean, there wasn't really a bad game that you did. It was all very much. There might have been games that maybe were less all-time classics in terms of, but I enjoyed them all, really. I mean, you had Quack and Super Overdrive, things like that. Now, one game that I really love, and this probably, as I say, the busiest, one of the busiest years that you were doing was in 1993, and of course the platform Super Frog. Which, to our listeners, if you've never played the game, it was a fantastic, very fast platformer, mixing in Sonic-like speed with Mario levels. It had lots of imagination and variety, a real sort of classic. And of course that fantastic intro animation by Eric Schwartz, who was so prevalent in the demo scene. So I mean, what's your memories of this one? Was it again you were saying, look, let's produce like a Sonic style game?
Well, it was very much like you just said. It was taking the strong gameplay from Nintendo and marrying it with modern day platform speed. So we wanted his own hero, which just happened to be a frog, and we worked really hard on Super Frog, and I think it's perhaps the most rounded game that we ever did together in terms of tidiness, in terms of difficulty curve, and I think really it's the first time we had like a team of testers playing the game from an early day right through. So it was, rather than have unfair dropouts in the gameplay as we perhaps did in the 2 years previous, it was a game that played a lot. Just it was a happier experience for everybody who played the game, I think, including us testing it.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. I think I agree with you there. It was you could tell it had a good difficulty curve and things, which you're right, perhaps, although they were ironed out in some of the budget releases, perhaps some of the earlier games had those.
Well, there was no test.
Yeah. Did you consider any other sort of characters before you hit on choosing a frog? Or?
No, it was. I mean, back when we were doing the early pre-production stuff on Super Frog, I mean, the look of the game and the everything really was down to Rico. So Rico would come up with a look and then come up with a character, really, and he wanted to do a frog. I mean, I had lots of conversations about, we were going to talk about having the frog having a Geordie voice by the actors in Auf Wiedersehen Pet, actually, and we approached them, and it didn't work out, needless to say. But it was the kind of thing we just wanted to do, just have a different character than to take it a bit left field. So it didn't work out having a Geordie accent. So
yeah, I was going to say, that would have been brilliant, wouldn't it? That would be really good.
Well, it's funny, the original intro sequence that Eric did, the bottle that the frog drunk was a bottle of Newcastle Brown. So it was later changed to Lucozade. So
yeah, I was going to ask with that. I mean, was that like a licensing deal you managed to arrange with Lucozade?
Yeah, so other people within the organisation had said, "Oh, there's a license opportunity. We've been approached. Can we make it Lucozade?" So, well, this is first real experience of marketing and licensing. So they said, yeah, as long as it doesn't impinge on the gameplay and the bottle ingredients has the same effect within the game, then no problem. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the idea though, Newcastle Brown Ale. That probably would have raised a few eyebrows in the Daily Mail.
Well, yeah, I mean, needless to say, we used to drink quite a bit of Newcastle Brown. So
fantastic. So as I say, 1993. I mean, you're really going full speed here. Obviously you had like the sequel to Alien Breed 2, and you had one game I think well worth of mention. Well, actually, just with Alien Breed 2 and the sequels, the 2D sequels. I mean, how did you feel with those games? Did you feel that sort of it took things forward, or were you disappointed?
I think we tried to always build upon what had been built before. I think it was difficult for me in that time because there was so much other titles being worked on, so I could never concentrate fully. We just make sure that you do a lot of interesting things, all the aspects that people really enjoyed about the first game, that there was more variety, there was more interesting, just make it something that we could be proud of. So I think it was hard to make a splash like we did the original games. You can only make that splash once. So it was just a case of, just taking it forward really, and making the game good. I mean, I think technically they were great. It's hard to make it people look around quite as much as they did first time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and particularly when you're doing so many games over that period. Now, another big game for 1993 was, of course, Body Blows. Now, to our listeners, if you've never played Body Blows, it was an attempt it was a clone of Street Fighter 2, which was a really big deal to our listeners that perhaps didn't have an Amiga back in the day. Everybody in the gaming world were desperate for a Street Fighter 2 game, and it was terrible on the Amiga. It wasn't very good on the Amiga, so everybody was screaming for a half decent fighting game on the Amiga. And Body Blows, for all its flaws in hindsight, with some of the balancing with the moves, it really delivered back then. I mean, what was your memories? Because this is a different development team, wasn't it? That one came in.
So we got approached by a pair of developers, Danny Burke and Judy McMillan, and Danny was the creative side, and he was a big Neo Geo player, and yes, you're right, there was a massive calling for Street Fighter 2. It wasn't my area of expertise or interest, to be honest, but after a few conversations we got, there's a gap in the market for an Amiga fighting game. We've been blessed in a way because the Amiga Street Fighter 2 was god awful, as you mentioned. So we took aspects of what we'd done on early Amiga games and just and went for it with Danny and Junior, and it became very successful. And we worked on some other games with Danny and Junior.
Yeah, of course, because they did ATR as well, wasn't it? All terrain racing, and of course the sequel to Body Blows was Body Blows Galactic, which I love that one. That was really good. And of course you combined them with Ultimate Body Blows, which had all the characters. Yeah. Interesting actually with Body Blows Galactic, because I remember that had really quite a nice game concluded free with it, Apache. I mean, how did that come about? Was that like a game you were planning to release? Or?
It was an idea for a game with Psionic, actually. So it's coded by Dave and Aidan. So it just became a nice little game, but not sufficient for a full release, not even a budget. So we just thought it'd be quite nice to package it in.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, it was a lovely inclusion. I remember getting that and being over the moon. Had to have an extra game included with the box and things. And interesting. I mean, obviously the Amiga was so synonymous with piracy. I mean, how did you feel about that at the time?
Well, I think it was always you were fighting a battle, and it was about 93 going on to 94 when it became a losing battle. We were blessed. We could always sell enough games, to make a profit, pay the guys, and be pleased about it. But it sort of into 94, piracy was such a problem that there's really little point dwelling on the Amiga. We had to look around because otherwise there'd be no Team 17.
Yeah. And I guess around about this time, isn't 93, 94, is the CD32 sort of came on board, which of course you got involved with. I mean, what was your sort of take on the CD32? Did you feel it was going to be the saviour, or?
No, we were a little bit nonplussed, to be honest. We obviously all it was just a medium, a platform. It didn't really offer anything more to the game other than storage, really. So technically it didn't, and I hated the controls.
Yeah, the controller was horrible, wasn't it? The dog bone was affectionately.
There was a lot of fuss about CD at the time, but it didn't really offer much to the game. So we didn't get full behind it. We just did compilations, really.
Yes, because you didn't do any like CD remastering. I think on one of them you had that infamous. Was it on Tower Assault where you had the full motion video?
Oh yeah.
Which is a great watch. I'll share it in the show notes. Was that just?
Yeah. So we got 2 or 3 guys at Team 17 in the early days of Team 17 who reckoned it was capable of they could do movies and whatever else. So they concocted a storyline. So go for it. It just it was quite clear we had a very low budget and it was all a bit tongue in cheek. But I mean, and the guy Chris Blythe, who did lots of really cool renderings on the Amiga at that time. So it was all using the Amiga to do everything, and it's quite funny looking back at it now.
Yeah, it's got a certain charm for all its teeth. I do like it. Now, in 1994, you also got another developer that got on to great things. Come on, that was of course Bloodhouse and their game Super Stardust. You did the publishing for. So, I mean, was this again another ready-made game that sort of came to you?
In that, it was a game that was ready, looking for a publisher. We'd already been having discussions with Housemarque as they were to become. No one knows since 92, 93. So, and it's still to this day really good friends. And it was again Europe and for quality, really. So we'd started in Sweden and gone to Norway, and then Finland was on the horizon as well. So it was great to work with those guys.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I mean, to our listeners that perhaps don't know the game, it's like a beautiful version of Asteroids with great graphics, amazing music, and of course, as you mentioned, Bloodhouse did a merger and became Housemarque, who of course went on to do Stardust HD, Resogun, Next Machina, and games like that. So I mean, they went on to amazing things. Did you get involved with the initial sequel of Super Stardust that came on CD32 and?
No, it was a bit like our Amiga games. It was just like a passing compilation. It wasn't months of work. It was just making sure it was on there and it worked and it was as good as it can be in the time allocated for it, really.
Yeah. So you're coming on to 1995, and of course the game Worms was released. You also had ATR and things like that, but of course Worms was the big deal back in the day, made by Andy Davidson, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how did this come about?
And Andy brought a demo to us at one of the London events, which were prevalent at the time, and Andy had put the game into Amiga formats. Game demo competition was unsuccessful, but he brought it with a view to publishing, and I just loved it. Just the inane, ridiculous detail had gone into giving the name the Worms' birthdays and all sorts of silly things like that. But I initially said, we'd love to publish it. We'll publish it as budget because the graphics were fairly simple. But when we took the game back to the office, we just couldn't stop playing it.
That's awesome. So this was Total Wormage, the prototype, wasn't it? Yeah. Sorry, you say.
Everybody would stay behind playing it. So then it just became a case of making the game more rounded and fuller featured, and then we looked to release it as a full price title. At the same time, we were Team 17 were approached by Ocean Publishing regarding doing a deal with a lot of Team 17 games to be published by Ocean and appearing on different formats. So all that was happening at the same time as Worms. So they eventually saw Worms and got right behind it. Then it became releasing a game like Worms with a full marketing budget, which would never happen before. Cinema ads, everything. It was crazy. And everything was happening so fast. And it was such a success. And it's trying to think of details back that happened in those days is quite hard because time went so quick, and the game was all of a sudden we went from games that had sold sort of 30,000-40,000 on Amiga, which was quite a reasonable amount for Amiga, to sort of hundreds of thousands, and like the PlayStation version sold over 1 million, and it was just an insane time.
I can imagine. Yeah, no, I mean, it was a huge success. It was such a great game. I mean, so with the Total Wormage prototype was there many differences to that original prototype?
The Amiga version largely stayed as it was. It was just something that Andy used to play. I think Andy used to play it more than develop it. So it took him ages to get round to actually finish it. But to be honest, by 95, the Amiga version wasn't a massive commercial concern.
Of course.
It was all about really the PlayStation and the other the consoles really. So it was sort of decided really to let Andy alone to hone it and finish it until he was happy with it to be released.
Well, it certainly worked. I mean, it was a beautiful balancing. It's such a shame the prototype. I don't think anyone has a copy of it anymore.
Yeah, I used to have it. It used to be in a box of discs at my mother's, but I don't think it's there now.
Oh, that's a shame. And then, of course, so this is really the sort of like the death knell of the Amiga, isn't it? I mean, you had Team 17 came out obviously with 3D versions of Alien Breed. There was Alien Breed 3D and the sequel, The Killing Grounds, which were, to our listeners, a pretty solid attempt at doing a Doom clone.
Yeah, a Doom and a Quake.
And a Quake, exactly. The sequel was more Quake. And it was, I mean, the only thing was, you needed really meaty hardware. I mean, even on a basic 1200 it wasn't feasible, and the CD32 really couldn't cope either.
No, well,
because big
I had to have a plug-in processor, and it was a bit beyond the pale to expect everybody to buy one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what was your memories of those two games? And
well, I mean, we were fortunate enough to have Amigas with beefed hardware, and we were blown away by the work that Andy Clitheroe, who coded both of them, who was a student at York Uni, and actually to this day still work with Andy. Very clever guy, and what he was doing, yes, he was doing a Doom clone, but it just seemed to make sense to here's a universe that we created a game following, make the game about that really, rather than able to do a Doom clone as such.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, as I say, I mean, in the wonderful world of emulation, and it was great that it was the first one was included in the Amiga Mini recently. Yeah. To be able to see it with all the bells and whistles to run. It's quite a solid game, really. It's just obviously my first experience was on the CD32 that I had, and it was difficult to play.
Yeah,
No, that's great. So of course, obviously the Amiga's pretty much. I mean, you were really one of the last I think probably the last major publisher that stuck with the Amiga to the end.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have been a difficult time.
Yeah, I mean, with everything to thank the Amiga for, really, bringing us together, just being able to make the games in the way that we made them, you know, just a perfect storm, really, that we were able to do it in that time period with those people and on that machine. And it was a great shame that the mainstream commercial viability dropped off.
Yeah, no, it was. I can't help but feel that Commodore could have done so much more. They really had, certainly in Europe,
there's the problems in the Commodore in America and Commodore in Europe is a small subset of them, and the American and the Europe's didn't get on well. I think that's been the same for most companies that have got American and European bases. There always used to be infighting, so it was no different back then, and the personalities wanted different things. So I mean, you know, Dave Pleasance, who's in UK, was very supportive, and you know, and again, it's still taught today to this day. You know, we had really good support from Commodore. We did everything we could to hang around and make sure we helped them.
Yeah, no, he's a lovely guy. I was lucky enough to meet Dave Pleasance. He's at one of the Expo events, and yeah, he's a lovely guy. So I can imagine him being quite supportive and keeping it all going. So obviously, you did try as a company to sort of enter the PlayStation market more. Obviously, Worms, the multiple sequels came out on all platforms. That definitely seemed to be one of the main things. Now, one of the things that maybe a lot of our listeners don't know is you did do a Project X sequel on the PlayStation called X2 No Relief, which came out in 1996, still done by pretty much the core team. Now, I suppose actually the first question is, what was the reason for not using the name recognition of Project X, just calling it X2?
I think I'm just trying to think of a really dim and distant past conversation. Yeah. I think we just went with X2. The tagline wasn't really used. There was a feeling that because it was born on Amiga, there wouldn't be much of an interest or following on other formats, because it was done on Saturn as well. Although it was only released in Japan and on Saturn. And it's funny enough as well. Compared to the original, which didn't have a PlayStation unit, X2 did, and it still ended up rock hard. So we did the Oceans Testing Department, which in our view made the game. This setup of the game was so difficult. We did like we did it on the Amiga. With the Japanese version played an awful lot better. So I think if you ever to play X2, get the Japanese version.
Ah, that's good to know, because it is rock hard on the. And I didn't realise that it came out on the Saturn as well. That's awesome. Yeah. Must collect that. I love collecting from a Saturn, and I own it on the PlayStation. But that'd be great. I mean, how did you find this time though? That suddenly you're on 32-bit consoles, very different world from the Amiga. I mean, how were you
in hindsight, looking back? I don't think any of us in the UK managed really well for a few years. There was a massive relearning and adoption of new platforms to consider. I mean, the basics, obviously, the technology was the same, but the platform was different. So we had to, and at the same time, teams getting bigger and technology moved on 3D, which is moving so fast. We had to really take an awful lot of things into consideration. So I think it was a difficult period because quite a few games that got started and didn't get finished, didn't work out as well as we hoped. And we were quite lucky in that Team 17 were releasing them. Publishers were only interested in the latest Worms game from Team 17. So it was difficult to try and get anything new off the ground. So it was, you know, quite a difficult period. And if you look back in the sort of history of the developers, there's so many independent developers went down during that period.
Yeah, it must have been very difficult, and say with 3D and the pressure of 3D and bigger teams and to
Well,
build.
yeah.
I mean, you mentioned quite. You know, you tried to get a few games off the ground. What can you remember? What any of them were? Did you try and bring any of the any other Amiga games to the PlayStation? Or
No, we had a few. Obviously, the growth of the PC occurred as well at this time. We had a 3D platformer on a PlayStation called Fun Dazzle Magic Land, which went around in various guises for a couple of years before eventually got canned, unfortunately. And you know, quite a lot again. I'd have to think about it for a long time, and there was so many ideas for games that, like in the past, small teams would come, but it was quite a challenge to get a small team to accept that a small team wouldn't cut it anymore. You were probably looking at about 15-20 people to get a rounded, competent PlayStation and Saturn game ready. Really, it was, and quite a lot of the teams were involved in hugely expensive intros that became the norm. So it was a difficult time, you know. And I can remember being, spending most of the time being annoyed.
yes, yeah, it must have been so frustrating. And that sounds interesting. That Fun Davo Magic Land was that a human character 3D platformer? Was it or? Sorry, I realised it was a long time ago.
Well, I wasn't a project I was managing, so
I see.
I didn't know it too well.
Yeah, no, that's good. Actually, just interestingly, while we're talking about unfinished games, was there any on the Amiga that was unfinished, or perhaps games you started but didn't finish?
Only a couple. Later on Amiga, by the same Alien Breed team, in that they were going to do a game called, just forgotten for a second, it'll come back to me, but it's doing me head in now.
There's a big
King of Thieves. It's called King of Thieves.
King of Thieves. Okay.
Yeah, it's a pirate-based, essentially Alien Breed, but with pirates.
That sounds awesome.
Theme. Yeah. I took the decision, which was quite unpopular at the time, I thought the game didn't have enough to stand out on its own, other than it got some really strong visuals, but I just felt we needed a bit more to hang on to than just nice graphics. So we ceased development of it. So I know Rico was really upset with me at the time, but I wanted more of the game than what I saw was present.
Yeah, no, I totally get. Did any of that artwork survive or anything like that?
I imagine if it did, it'll be with Rico.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good. So obviously you've had this long period where really a variety of games were coming out, but mostly Worms were, the sequels to Worms. Were you ever worried of it getting a little oversaturated as time went on?
Possibly, because we were living and breathing Worms, and it was. I mean, we used to really think hard about new ideas and new ways to play the game, and I think we were fairly successful in keeping the original formula, but bringing new things to the game. But it did become tiring. That it was so frustrating that other new games weren't really on the radar of other publishers, and he needed a publisher on board to actually get something to market. So it was a blessing and a curse at the same time, really, about Worms. It was so successful, but it blocked a lot of the thought and design of new games. So, but I think if you talk to other developers, that has happened quite a few of the times at other places where you can't get away from the game that made a success of you.
Yeah, of course. No, it's one of the problems with the industry as a whole today, isn't
Yeah,
it? Is
yeah.
everyone, certainly in the AAA space, likes to
Oh, yeah,
play it
yeah,
safe.
yeah.
But so obviously we get to about 2011, and am I right? You decided to leave Team 17, or you still have a stakehold? Is that right?
Well, I decided to leave in 2009, 2010.
Okay.
Yeah, I just felt I'd done my time and I needed to sort of do my own thing.
Yeah. Must have been difficult, something you started up and
Well,
seen
yeah, yeah.
grow. But
It's. I mean, I was still, massively friends with everybody, all the developers at Team 17. It's a local company, and I'd been on a 20-year journey. So, most of my adult life I'd been at Team 17. So it was a difficult time for me personally because I was sort of going through throes of divorce and the divorce with Team 17. So, and as I tend to do in life, I don't do things by half, and if I'm going to do it, I do it right. So I just felt it was time to walk away.
yeah, no, so it's understandable after 20 years that wanting something new. It's particularly when you've caught in that cycle of like not that many new games being able to bring to market.
Yeah, I mean, I started off at Team 17. I started off as a creative director, so I was really in all the games and really giving everything to them. Then again, sat back and I was doing studio management, where I became more distant to the games, and then ended up doing development, which I was very fleetingly involved in games. So I felt I was moving further away, really.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I still enjoyed my role, and I just got to know different people internationally as well, and I enjoyed all that. But I needed a break, really. So.
Yeah, and so as I understand, you joined Double 11. Is that right? A
Yeah,
mobile developer, game
yeah.
developer.
I worked with 3 or 4 different independent developers when I left Team 17, and I worked with the Double 11 in the formation of this company. Is doing fantastically well now, and I had good times. I worked with X in Oxford, have done quite a lot of stuff, and also New Star Games. So we've done amazing success, Retro Ball and New Star Soccer. So.
Oh, fantastic. How do you find mobile gaming compared to,
In many
obviously?
ways, it's very much like the independent early days of how it was in the Amiga. There's no big commercial overlords. It's independent, self-publishing, only small teams as well, largely speaking. So the feeling's very similar. And the platform hold Apple and Android very much hands off. So it's a level technical playing field where you can create great things on the same device as a multinational can.
Yeah, no, it's good. And is that what you're still doing today? Is it sort of working in the mobile space or?
Yeah, it has been. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, that's fantastic. So, just a couple of questions, and sort of like your general thoughts in the industry as well. But so, one question I've always wondered is how come there was never a sequel to Super Frog? Because I mean, I always struck me as it was quite a success. I just wondered why. Was there any particular reason or?
I think as a team, we, and especially me, felt quite drained at the end of Super Frog. It was a lot of effort, and we really went all out to make it as good as it could be. And because of that, the thought of doing it again always felt a burden. It has been mentioned a few times in later years, but it's never got off the ground. We thought about doing various things with the character, but it just didn't work out. So it was kind of nice in a way to leave it as to stand still.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There is actually one of the other questions just hitting on 3D. I've incorporated a lot of the questions that they'd asked from some of our listeners in the interview. But one of the questions was about 3D worms. I mean, what was your feelings when switching to 3D?
Well, there was a massive clamour for to do with 3D work from all the publishers. Were really keen for us to do it, but we resisted it as long as we could because we didn't think that technology was there to make it a statement game. And it was much later on that when we did Worms 3D, that again a lot of it was driven by Andy Clitheroe, that name again, who did great things in-house, who had worked on things that we thought it can work. You know, once we worked out that things could be done, we were open to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And just as a sort of general sense, I mean, obviously you've been right through the whole of the gaming industry, really, right from the Spectrum days right the way through to mobile and modern days. I mean, what's your thoughts on the industry and where it's going and where it's been, I guess?
Well, when it first started, there was no industry. There were some companies that released games in a very, very different way to it is today. It's massively commercial now, and I think there's a lot less concern for what the actual game is, you know, and it's more about making something that can survive, really. And I don't know, the love for pure gaming has been lost a little bit. I can understand why, you know, seeing it happen, and just the amount of commercial pressure on people and on teams, and I think really why mobile games and small team people can really look after their own game design a lot easier than, you know, 300 people doing a PlayStation 5 game. That's a small team, you know.
Yeah.
You know, you get teams of up to 1,000 nowadays. I can't see how everybody can get excited about their input in a game when it's just the textures on blanks. It's crazy. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of the latest massive multi-title massive teams. I preferred it when it was, you know, you could get individual nuances on a design that was a pure. I don't know. It's a hard question.
I appreciate.
It makes me sound really negative and down on it, but it's a different world. So I got involved in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the indie scene is thriving, although it's so oversaturated. It's a bit of a lottery to make money at it. But I mean, certainly I'm been blown away by. It's nice to see, you know, when you compare to perhaps the PlayStation days where they were pushing people towards, like, you know, bigger teams in 3D. It's nice that we've sort of come full circle where there is independent games and those smaller games coming back, but yeah, there's so much quality out there that it's or maybe my time has become less to be able to play all of these games.
Well, I mean, if you just look at the amount of releases on the Switch, you can't hope to keep on top of it.
No.
I mean, a lot of it, you know, the bar is level. It's really good quality, and I mean, I just started playing as Tiny Metal, which is, for all intents and purposes, is Advance Wars.
Oh wow! I'll have to play that. I love Advance.
Well, it's very good because there's been a delay on the Switch Advance Wars, but even if I spend 20-30 hours playing that game, there's just I've no hope of keeping up on, you know, other games. I don't know, it's about 15 a week, and you know, they all look interesting, but you know, it's making it stand out, and it's difficult.
Yeah, no, it's lovely to see that you're still so into video games and things, because often, well, it happens to the best of us, but you know, often people have become burned out that perhaps we're in the industry or like lost interest. So it's lovely that you still sort of play video games.
I think there's been periods when I've certainly felt burnt out. I mean, I as an aside, I've built a games room at home and full of original Atari arcades.
Wow.
In there, you know, Tempest and Battlezone and Asteroids, Cabaret, and I've got Phoenix in there, Gyrus, Galaxian, Super Sprint, and my PlayStation 5. I have trouble playing with that because I suffered a stroke 4 years ago, and I can't use the gully controller, so it's easier for me to play early 90s arcade games. So.
Oh, there's so many classics. I mean, I'm not lucky enough to have in a game room or even have a game room here, but I often go to Arcade Club in Bury that has them all, and they're amazing, aren't they? Those early Atari games. So, what was your favourite of the early Atari?
I would say Asteroids or Battlezone. Asteroids or Battlezone. I mean, Battlezone, pure technical, at the time it's mind-blowing. It's less so now, but my God, back in 1980 or 79, it's just astounding, yeah.
Have you got the one with the periscope? Because that seems...
No, that's, well, I made a decision not to get the full-size ones, so I collect the Cabaret, which is the mid-sized ones.
Oh, yes, yeah.
So, especially with me having a stroke, I struggle to move them about the best of the time, so I can just about shift the Cabaret versions. So, it's got the tank controller on it and everything else. Just hasn't got the periscope. So,
it's still, as you say, an amazing.
It still plays great. So I went on a crazy search for years to get a Tempest, and I've actually ended up with 3, and I've stuck with 1 now. So I've got one that's bulletproof because it's forever breaking down. But now it just works 100% now. So I've got all working all the time Tempest. So I'm very happy.
Oh, that's amazing. That is one of my favourites. I love Tempest. It's one of those few games where you really get into the zone, isn't it? And
yeah.
Sort of playing it. Are you looking forward to the Atari 50th anniversary compilation?
Yeah, I'm obviously following it. I'd be interested to see what goes on.
I'm looking. I've seen a list. I don't want to necessarily spoil it for you, but Food Fight Arcade's going to be there, which I'm awesome. And Tempest 2000 on the Jaguar. They're the two that I'm excited for. I mean, of course, you have them on. You know, these days you can play them on MAME and things, but you can't beat an original, a official copy.
Yeah.
Is there any, before we wrap things up, is there any sort of other things you wish that I'd asked or wanted to say for the interview?
No, not really. I mean, it's been quite a chat.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's all right. I always think I'm going to struggle to remember everything. It is quite so long ago, and there's so much stuff happened, and so much conversation, and so many games. And so many. If we released it on one format, it was released on 5 others. So all those had to be done. So only the lead format tends to get remembered. So the amount of work on other formats is amazing, and so much work talking to press and people over the years. It was just non-stop all the time. So I'm waffling now, but
no, it's fascinating to hear.
It's difficult to know. There's always something I remember afterwards. And it's funny. One thing that amuses me is that everything is so politically assured and correct now, and it certainly wasn't back in the late 80s, early 90s. And it's changed an awful lot.
Yeah,
Stuff you can get away with, like the Ealing Breed cheat codes, for example. There's silly stuff you used to get away with. You get shot these days for doing stuff. So.
Well, was it actually, you mentioned with like all the dealing with the magazines and things, was it as a cesspit as it sort of sounds in terms of companies paying for reviews? I'm not necessarily yourself, but
you hear things like that. Things were raised later on about like certainly Team 17 never paid for anything. Everything. I mean, we were fortunate, and we've got interesting games, and people were very keen to get exclusives and everything else. I mean, I think we ended. I think we were like front cover of at least one magazine every other month. So and at the time that was all new to me. So it was everybody it was just naive, But as things become more important and projects move from tens of thousands into hundreds of thousands into millions, it became vital. So it wouldn't surprise me if all that went on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sorry I've taken so much of your time, but it was lovely to hear such a... It's your fault for being so prolific in the gaming industry and having so much to talk about. But no, it's been a genuine pleasure, and thank you. And
no problem.
pass on our thanks from our listeners.
Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.